Welcome to this video tutorial with Virtual Racing School for the GTE class of the IMSA Sports Car Championship on iRacing. This week we visit the Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, better known as Mosport, where I'll be looking at a lap driven by Rens Broekman with the Ferrari 488 GTE, which he's driven in default afternoon weather to match the official series. I'll play the lap in full for you first before then going into further analysis. Okay, so that was 1 minute 13.933. So as ever then, from the list of data packs on the VRS website, I'm going to choose the IMSA series with the Ferrari as driven by Rens Broekman. We're going to choose week 4, and this will load up the session details where of course you can download the lap files, the replay and the setup. We're just going to click on Learn Track, which will load up the driving analyzer, and it will start to play the lap through. I'm just going to pause that, slow it down to half speed and mute it. And if you're not familiar with what we're seeing here, you've got a steering angle input trace through the duration of the lap, as well as speed trace, brake and throttle input traces, and live driving inputs as well. So we're going to start off with turn 1, which is the first sector, and play it through. Obviously, crossing the start finish line, you want to keep the car over to the left hand edge of the circuit, and we just missed it there. But as you pass underneath the bridge, just go back a tiny little bit more so we can see it, you want to be thinking about turning in already. Now entry into turn 1 is going to be completely flat out initially, so I would say in between the bridge and this first telegraph pole in between is going to be your turn-in point. So yeah, completely flat out. The circuit is fairly cambered at the apex, so you don't want to turn in too late and miss it. And this circuit's really all about timing and getting your line right. In terms of brake input, there isn't really a braking point here. It's really just about lifting the throttle and then just teasing the brakes. And basically Rens is trying to carry as much speed through here as possible, but doesn't want the car to run wide mid-corner, doesn't want the car to wash out and understeer. So by just squeezing the brake, especially just before he picks up the throttle, if I just play it through, what he's doing there is helping the front end stay loaded up and eliminating any understeer, therefore allowing him to carry more speed on entry. So just play it through. You basically want to be aiming for this inside curb. You want to be hugging it all the way round, trying to avoid contact with it, aggressively. You want to get close to it, you don't want to actually hit it. And then just before it ends is going to be when you should be picking up the throttle, assuming that you're still tight to the curb at this point. And you're in 4th gear as well, so plenty of downforce, not much torque at the rear wheel, so you should be able to commit quite aggressively to the throttle. And then if you've timed it right, your momentum should carry you through to using the full extent of the track on the exit. Obviously, if you're running too wide, then you're picking up the throttle a bit too early. So important not to pick it up too early and time it just right, so you're right on the limit of grip all the way throughout the exit and running out onto this curb as well, without obviously dropping any wheels onto the grass. And then you continue to bring the car over to the right hand side of the track for entry into turn 2, where the circuit will crest, and of course it's completely blind on entry as you turn in. So I'm just going to pause it there, and Rens lifts the throttle and starts squeezing the brake very gently once again, similar to turn 1, just a little bit harder this time. And we can't actually see the apex at this point, but you need the car fully over to the right hand edge of the circuit, and it's just before cresting is when he's braking there. So that's also going to be his turn-in point as well. In fact, effectively you'll need to turn in slightly sooner than that to avoid running off the circuit, assuming that you've got the car aimed over to the right when you approach that turn-in point. So braking as we crest, keeping the car nice and tight. You can pretty much treat this as a double apex corner. So in order to achieve that, Rens has had a little bit more extra trail braking just to get the front end turned in. This is going to be his first apex, and if you need a reference, there are a couple of different lines that can work here, but it is important that you hit this first apex. You've got a little bit of extra tarmac here, which can be a reference that you could use. And as I said, it's okay to allow the car to run out wide away, assuming that you have slowed the car down enough that you know that the car will retighten again for the second apex. Now that's super important because you don't want to run too wide through the exit. And you'll also notice that Rens has already picked up the throttle, so that's just as the car just before the car starts to retighten, so that's just about timing. You're going to have to experiment with that. But yeah, he's picked up the throttle nice and early, knowing that the car has been slowed down enough prior to that to retighten. And you can see here we've got some extra bit of tarmac. This is going to be the second apex. Now, in order to the importance of that means that Rens stays within the edge of the circuit through the exit. So he's right on the limit there, and was on the edge of grip throughout the exit again, and obviously didn't have to lift, and that's absolutely critical. So play it through, and again, as we approach turn 3, bringing the car back over to the left hand side, and we've got there isn't really a braking reference as such, but you've got this billboard here on the left. Now you're going to be braking a few car lengths before there, and you're not going to be quite at the edge of the circuit when you start braking because you're still going to be aimed slightly left. As a result, you need to pretty much turn in as you brake, so you again can't afford to brake too hard. These cars don't have ABS, so you really can't afford to brake too hard whilst you're turning. And so Rens is peaking about 40-45% here before bleeding off as he turns in, again going for a fairly early apex and treating it like a very long apex. So it's not really a double apex, it opens out on the exit, but you need to go into it fairly early, and the road once again is kind of cambered in towards the apex, so if you miss your apex here, you're going to be seriously struggling to exit well. And notice his brake trace, he isn't braking very hard, but he's not coasting whatsoever, so he's holding the brake all the way in to the moment that he picks up the throttle. Now if he was to not have this little bit of braking here just before he picked up the throttle, the car would just push slightly wide and it would really compromise his exit. So important just to hold that brake all the way to the last second to ensure you get that last bit of rotation. And in terms of a reference, the curb on the right is just about to end as Rens picks up the throttle, and he's not committing straight to full throttle this time. It's a third gear corner. The circuit kind of crests a little bit as he's putting the power down, so it's a little bit more slippery than some of the previous corners through the exits. So a little bit of modulation, and then when he knows that he can sense that the car will run out no wider than the exit of the track, he commits to full throttle, and we can see that he's timed it very well, of course, and is using some of the curb, but no more than that through the exit. And then into turn 4 now, completely flat out down the hill, but it's not completely straightforward. You need to set the car up over to the right hand edge of the circuit before you reach the bridge to open the corner up enough to facilitate you not only driving through turn 4 completely flat out, but more importantly being able to hug the left hand edge of the circuit. Now you've got a kind of curb thing going on here. It's not painted, but basically you want to be pretty much next to that as it finishes. So in order to set yourself up nicely into Moss corner, you can't afford to run too wide off of turn 4. So I'll play it through, keeping it tight through there, and pretty much as soon as that curve finishes, Rens lifts off. Now the reason he's lifting off is to not run any wider than is necessary. So pretty much no reason to keep, committed to full throttle much longer than that. It's only wasting fuel, and it will compromise your entry into Moss. And then notice again when Rens starts braking, he's very, very gentle initially. Now he's got some steering angle on just as he starts braking. So as the car straightens up, he progressively increases the brake pressure, and we'll see, especially as the car compresses into the circuit as the track goes up the hill, obviously all the tyres load up and you get a lot more grip available at the tyres, which allows Rens to brake much harder, and you can see that he reaches a peak brake pressure here of about 70-75%, which he can do without locking up. Now you can see there's one lock-up light on the dash there visible, and as soon as that happens, I guess he anticipated it. You can't really respond this quickly, but yeah, just be aware of that. As soon as you start to turn in, you need to be bleeding off those brakes to avoid locking up a front inside wheel. So bleeding off, ensuring that he can get some lateral grip back from those front tyres. He has to come off the brake. You don't want to come off the brake completely, because you need to keep slowing down enough to get back to your second apex, which we'll get to for the exit, but also to keep the front end loaded up as we've discussed previously. But yeah, so this is your first apex. Very important to hit this in second gear, and then in the middle here you can allow the car to run out a little bit wide. The wider you run, the better your entry will be into the latter half of the corner, allowing for, in theory, a better exit, but obviously you don't want to push it too much and run off into the gravel, which is quite easy to do. And then again, we can see Rens is just holding those brakes just gently, just barely, until he reaches the second apex, where he's got the car absolutely hooked up where it needs to be, as close as possible to this inside curb, but because it's quite aggressive, he is avoiding making contact with it. So as close as you can get without actually hitting it, and that is also the exact moment when he picks up the throttle. Now we're in second gear, so there's plenty of torque at the rear wheels, but the reason that Rens is able to commit so aggressively to the throttle, he goes straight from nothing to 90% in an instant, is because the circuit's quite cambered, and it's a little bit downhill as you compress, as the car compresses into the apex. So there's plenty of grip there on exit, which you can take advantage of. Straighten the car up, allow the car to run out onto the exit curb, just avoiding the grass, and then that takes us into the next following straight. Now obviously here it's just about taking the line of least resistance, so you want to basically take the shortest distance, the straightest line, which will set you up into the approach to turn 8, where you've got some telegraph poles again on your left, which we can use as a reference for turning and braking. Now the second telegraph pole from the end is going to be just after when Rens brakes into turn 8, and he's already started turning in as he brakes as well. So again, he can't afford to brake too aggressively, and he wants to carry as much speed in on entry as possible. So he's braking very, very gently and making sure that he's hit his first apex. This is kind of another double apex corner, but just much higher speed than some of the others that we've looked at. So continuing to brake, he's hit his first apex there, hugging the curb but not making contact with it, and then his speed, the speed that he's carrying here, forces him a little bit away from the inside edge, but because he's holding those brakes, gets it back to the second apex, and then he's got enough rotation in the car at that point to be able to pick up the throttle quite committedly and keep the car, this is very important, hugging this curb through the exit, and keeps the car over to the right hand side so that when he brakes into turn 9 he's got a lot of track to work with for the entry. So he's got the car almost to the edge of the circuit on the right hand side when he starts braking, and again has to turn in pretty much as he brakes, so can't afford to brake very aggressively, wants to carry a decent amount of speed in, but wants to eliminate any entry understeer so that he can get the car in tight for the apex. And then just before the curb finishes there on the apex, he picks up the throttle again, this time being a little bit more hesitant actually on the throttle, only picking up to about 70%. And the reason that he does that is he doesn't want to run wide approaching the last corner on entry, so wants to keep the car nice and tight through the left to open the right hander up as much as possible, and starts braking just before he turns into the right hander there. And again, similar to the previous corner, braking very gently on entry, but trailing those brakes all the way into the apex to get the car rotating, hooking up with the apex curb, again a tall curb, hugging that curb but not making contact with it, and picking up the throttle as he apexes. So this time you'll see on exit he's very careful with how much throttle he applies and how cautious he is before reaching full throttle. So we're in second gear, there's plenty of power at the rear tyres and not much grip because there's a few bumps through the exit here, and also the track kind of crests again, so the rear end will go a little bit light. So you just need to be careful with the throttle and also open the steering up and anticipate some oversteer. And you can see a little bit of correction in Rens's steering trace up here, which he's just basically balancing the car through the exit for oversteer. And then opening the car up, taking advantage of this wide exit curb and using it in its entirety to maximize the exit speed and across the line. You can find all setups, replays and telemetry for your own use and analysis on virtualracingschool.com, where you can also book one-on-one tuition with world champions from the likes of Mosport. Good luck for this week, and feel free to post any questions or comments below. Thanks for watching.